flying home, and now he's flying home.
And
so
it's happened.
yeah,
Lots
it's
to talk
happened.
about.
He's gone.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Steve.
you.
Thank you. Five Live Sport is on the way from 12, and of course the live commentary of Liverpool versus Brentford at 2 p.m. But right now, before you get to all that sport, I've got some music for you. You're welcome. He's a guitarist, producer and DJ, best known for his work in bands like Ride, Oasis, BDI, and now Andy Bell is back with his second solo album, Flicker. Good morning, Andy. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi Laura, I'm great, thank you. I'm very happy to be on your show.
Oh, I'm delighted to have you on. I mean, Andy, what a career so far. You've been in bands for more than 30 years before you released your first solo album in 2020. How is it doing the solo projects without, I guess when you're in a band, you're kind of surrounded by so many people. We talked actually earlier on about jobs that feel exposing. It must feel quite exposing, but maybe it feels like the freedom of being solo.
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting question because I've been doing this solo thing pretty much all the way so far in lockdown and the pandemic era. So the first album came out with no interaction with people in a real way. So I was just on my own, sending stuff out and talking to people on phone calls or Zooms and whatever. And this is the first time I'm going to be going out on my own doing stuff, and it's different. It's good having a band around you. I mean, in my day job, I have a band all around me, which is very comforting and sort of feels good.
Well, let's just talk about because you're 2 years on from that debut album that you released, and you said kind of bringing out an album during lockdown. It's a weird time, as chatting to lots of musicians, and the promo trail is very different. You're not performing it live the way you'd like to, but that album
so different,
so different, and not what you're used to. But that album, The View from Halfway Down, it kind of focused on a major turn in your life and a big birthday. But what about Flicker? Moving on, what motivated you for this album?
Well, I dipped back into the same source material as I did for the first one. So, I turned 50 in 2020. So that was kind of where my head was at, kind of doing the first one, really thinking, well, now or never, I should really do so. I've always said I'd do like an album, and I'd actually started work on the tunes. So I'd gone into the studio with Gem Archer, my old bandmate from Oasis days. Pretty soon after David Bowie died, I kind of got the urge to go in and record some of my songs I'd had around for a long time to start this ball rolling. And so Gem helped me do that. And then The View from Halfway Down was the first set of tunes from it. And then I went back in and thought, well, I can, there's lots more here I can work with. So lyrically, the focus was different this time because it was now, a year or two on from the first one, and just thinking about how to go back into life after the pandemic. And that really coloured the songwriting.
The album it's a mammoth 18 tracks. And I guess when you start writing it, did you realise there was going to be so many tracks in it? Or it must be always hard to kind of edit down an album. Did you feel like you couldn't edit it down anymore? All 18 tracks had to make it?
Yeah, it's something that I really enjoy is the compiling.
Yeah.
This whole solo career, if you want to call it that, came out of me doing a single. And I was going to follow up the single with a 12-inch with 4 tracks on it. But then I couldn't decide on the 4. I just could not do it. So I ended up just kind of asking my record label guy, Nat, like, could I actually do 4 tracks? Could I just do an album with it and do 8 tracks? And he was like, yeah, that's fine. Do an 8-track. And that's how The View from Halfway Down happened. And so I always find it really good thinking about the sides of vinyl. I'm an old vinyl head. So it's always about that. So for this one, I kind of ended up, same sort of situation, ended up with a little bit more than I needed. And then I thought, well, I can either trim it down or just do a couple more bits and pieces and make it into a 4-sided double vinyl. And I decided to go that way, just go all out.
So why not go all out? And now the tour, you will begin at the end of the month. And how are you feeling going into the shows? Because you didn't really get out and about because of the so many live shows were cancelled. You couldn't do them with the previous album. How do you feel the experience of being a frontman? Because let's be honest, Andy, you've been in bands where you've got quite strong frontmen, quite.
Yeah, this is true.
So how do you feel kind of stepping into that position?
I have sidestepped the whole frontman thing by going out with an instrumental project. So I do play the songs off the new album and the first album and some of my other stuff like that I've done. But I do it with a kind of DJ rig meets guitar playing kind of level. So I don't do live vocals. So I don't do the frontman thing. And people hopefully know that when they buy tickets. I call it Andy Bell Space Station, and I draw in music from wherever I've feel like on the day.
Yeah.
Obviously, on this tour, I'll be doing a lot of stuff from this new album and playing over it, kind of DJing with it, just trying to do interesting stuff with the music.
It sounds incredible. I do want to talk about when you were in Oasis, because you were in the band for the final 8 years. How do you reflect on that time?
Oh, just the best times. I mean, I was so lucky. Me and Gem Archer, who is someone that I still see quite a lot, we joined the band at the same time in the end of 1999 and just had the greatest 10 years. I mean, traveling the world and doing incredible shows with the guys.
Were you surprised?
So, yeah.
Were you surprised when the band broke up? Had you hoped for it to continue on, or maybe one day, maybe? It's the one question you probably
Who
could
knows,
ask.
Laura?
Yeah.
That's the $1 million question. But yeah, I don't know.
You don't know. You are an Arsenal fan. We got to talk football.
Yeah.
You must be gutted the game's been cancelled against Spurs.
Yeah, it's a shame. It would have been a North London derby today, but of course we haven't got enough fit players to do it. Yeah.
It's a tough one. We are going to play music, because that's what we love to do in the show, and we've got a gorgeous track, Something Like Love. But before we play it, Andy, tell me a little bit about what it's about.
Okay, well, Something Like Love, it's kind of looking back quite a lot to younger days and the way you feel when you're young, and how memories change as you grow older, as you go back to stories from your own past, and sort of, I'm quite interested in the way that the brain can change your memories. Apparently that's something that happens.
Well, it's like when you go back, when you go back in times in different bands you've been in, you go, oh, that was like the best time of my life, and then you or like relationships, you go, that was a great relationship, and then you're like, oh, actually we had those bad days too. But memory is interesting, isn't it? What it remembers and what it changes.
Yeah, what you choose to focus on is what you end up living with and remembering. And I think, that's a good thing to remember when you may be thinking back on a bad time. It's kind of good to remind yourself, well, if I just try and think about the good parts of it, that is then what I will take from it.
It's a beautiful song, and we're going to share it now with our listeners. Andy, so lovely to talk to you this morning. Thank you for coming on the show.
Laura.
Thanks
you very much.
Right now we've got Andy Bell with an exclusive special recording of his new single, Something Like Love.
Lost in a reverie of future days. La 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 la. It's all been seen somewhere before, babe. Now time's not on our side. See the flicker as the fire starts to burn. It's not enough. Burn down the world for me. Use a mirror to remember and look back with something like love. I wonder why and how, what we became so jaded. You should never wish your time away. Now the picture's faded. No more days of chasing and reeling, playing tunes to block out the bad dreams. Lost in a reverie of future days. La 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 la. It's all been seen somewhere before, babe. Now time's not on our side. See the flicker as a fire starts to burn. It's not enough. Burn down the world for me. Use a mirror to remember and look back with something like love. La 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 la. It's not enough. Burn down the world for me. See the flicker as a fire starts to burn. It's never enough. Burn down the world for me. Use a mirror to remember and look back with something like love.
That was Andy Bell with a special version of his new single, Something Like Love, from his brand new album Flicker, which is out on the 11th of February.